and in between ride these World Cup races and then come good for the Olympics before going on to the World Road Race. This is Michael Zarabitia, who is trying to have a little dig for the Once team.
Well, this man actually was looking at a fantastic future when he turned professional for Banesto. Had an awful lot of problems with his back. He had a discal hernia, had to have an operation, and he's slowly now coming back to the level that he was at before. But for a lot of these riders, the Spanish riders, Phil, they're thinking much more about the upcoming Tour of Spain.
Well, this is one of those breakaways, I think, if you're a good bike rider, you'd love to be in it. But you look around at the quality of the cyclist around you, and it is a fabulous breakaway. Michele Bartoli, the new champion of Italy, here in this little group.
Also in the group, Roman Weinstein's a man who I think if he puts in a couple of good performances over the last few World Cups, Phil, he could actually move up and threaten Eric Zabel. In the early part of the season, we thought Zabel was untouchable. We thought he had the World Cup in the bag and he was going to actually walk away with it. But as we come to the latter part of the season, he's had a very long season, starting back in January at the Tour Down Under in Adelaide.
Well, looking down on the shores of Lake Zurich here, this breakaway got away at 188 kilometres in. Armstrong, Ulrich, Francesco Casagrande, Frère, Rebellin, Kamazin, Dufour and Andrei Kivilev. That's the composition. Bartoli trying to reduce the damage here. They have pulled it back a little bit as they've split up behind, but they're still a long way behind. As we're going towards the final lap now, it's going to be a tough call to bring that breakaway back. There's the main field, slowly but surely slowing down, I think.
Really being reduced in numbers. This is a very difficult course here. The fact is you do have these 6 laps, and when it does get tough, a lot of these riders will be looking at the showers and taking a lap out and finishing maybe a little bit earlier than they would have done in a place-to-place event. But you see that group, Phil, at the front, all of those riders for the moment are the top riders in international cycling, and they all feel that they can win this bike race.
This is one of the few occasions, in fact, when Switzerland closes its roads, especially in this region, for a professional bike race, but this one has a long history, starting way back in 1914 when Henri Reinwald of Switzerland was the first winner ahead of Otto Wiedmer. In fact, Swiss riders getting the top 3 places. Really is a beautiful day, but the main field down there looks to me as though they've had enough of it because they know now that the breakaway has gone. There's a chase group as well, and the main field are going to drop a long way behind here.
It's a race that over the last few years has been very much dominated by the Italians. Italians taking the win 5 times out of the last 7 years. Johan Museo breaking into that record of theirs in 1995, and the surprise winner from Poland last year, Gregor Gierdowski of the French Cofidis team at the time. He's not in the breakaway today, but this really is an escape of the heads of states. Jan Ullrich at the moment sitting at the back, and Ullrich, a great one-day rider, Phil. I think he will have to try and win alone because there are some very fast finishers in this group, including Oscar Freire.
Just under 30 miles to go, which means the riders now have been racing for the best part of 5 hours, and at average speed of just over 25 miles an hour, despite the 2 severe climbs. It's been a cracking pace by these riders, but it's producing the known names at the front. It's very unusual to see so many good riders get there. The odd one out, really, as far as reputation goes, is probably Andrei Kivilev, and yet he's a rider who one day is going to make himself a big winner. I'm sure of that, maybe today.
It's also a question of pride, I think, in this breakaway, because none of these riders actually want to sit on. They all want to contribute to the front because they are great leaders and heads of state and statesmen for the sport of international cycling. Davide Rebellin is a rider who in the past has been a great rider in one-day bike races, but today he's really up against the best. And maybe we could look at a win for Francesco Casagrande, because I think he's got the right preparation. He rode the Tour of Italy, he didn't ride the Tour de France, and he now is building up towards the Olympic Games in Sydney.
Just watching, going through on the outside there, Jan Ullrich, just calmly having lunch and just keeping his pace. No big effort, just the steady tempo. Armstrong having a little chat with probably Johan Brunel in the team car behind to get an assessment on the chase group led by Michele Bartoli. They know the sprint of Oscar Freire, the world champion. If he gets to the finish and can smell it, then they're going to have a job beating him. Laurent Dufaux riding on home turf as well. He's made the decisive move. A lot of people will be cheering for him now.
It's going to be a difficult one to call, though, because David Rebellin will certainly be looking for the victory here, and this is going to be one which, for the moment, Phil, I don't really want to put my money on, because they're all great winners.
That's right, because we use these circuits now, we no longer finish on the old rickety track at Oerlikon, which was the old concrete stadium there, which is a shame in many ways. Ulrich knows what it's like to score on there, and it's a dicey old bowl, but it's a much smoother road finish now. And these guys know that all of the action is right here. They've just got to assess now who is the strongest, and I'm sure they'll be attentive on the final lap on the climbs.
I feel certain somebody's going to try and split this group, because it is rather too large at the moment, and there's some very good climbers in the group, and I have a feeling the attack may well come from Francesco Casagrande. But Ulrich has come off the Tour de France in excellent condition. He is, I think, looking for a big win in a World Cup, Phil. He's in great form right now, and I think he will try and get rid of one or two of these riders, including Oscar Freire.
Well, don't forget, Oscar Freire hasn't won a World Cup, but he had third in Milan-San Remo this year, and he was fifth in San Sebastian not very long ago, so he also is ready for a win.
Ulrich, though, looking very strong indeed, right on the bottom of those bars. A great bike rider, and I think he will go to the Tour of Spain this year as a major favourite, and I think the possibility is that he'll go straight off there and then on to the Olympic Games. The time check there looking like around about 4.5 minutes over the rest of the main field.
Well, that should be enough. Jan Ulrich just taking a look over his shoulder, making sure there's nobody creeping up here. Oscar Freire has slowed down his work rate a little bit, and he's sitting around the back of the field.
Well, Freire obviously getting word from the team car behind that Michele Bartoli was in a small group trying to come across, but I think he will find himself pretty shortly back in the main field as well. Oscar Freire, Phil, for me has been a major revelation this year. A surprise win last year in the World Championships, but he really has confirmed. And if he can get that injury put to rights, then he's going to be a pretty remarkable bike rider over the next few years.
Just looking at the breakaway here, Casagrande and Laurent Dufaux and Kivilev must feel slightly odd here, because they're the only ones who've never won an Olympic world title or a gold medal, and they're in this breakaway too.
Well, Laurent Dufaux actually had a pretty good start to the season. He finished 6th overall in the Amstel Gold Race, but had a disastrous Tour de France where he was actually on a course of antibiotics for an inflamed prostate, and he came out of that Tour de France not really in very good shape. He's trying to get himself back into form for the Olympic Games. He has been selected, and that's caused a bit of a stir really, because everybody thought that Pascal Richard, the winner of the Olympic Games road race in Atlanta, should have had an automatic ticket. But this year I don't really think Pascal Richard has got all cylinders firing.
Now, Pascal hasn't had a great season. He came over and gave a lot of credibility to the new Linda McCartney team in Europe, as did Max Chandry. And so Pascal Richard, I think, although he's given us that credibility, he hasn't had a good year at all. He had that problem at the start of the Giro d'Italia along with Ben Brooks, two riders on the Linda McCartney team. Food poisoning overnight after the prologue, and that was as far as they went.
Armstrong taking on board a bottle there, and it looked like Dr. Eric Heiden handing it up.
Eric Heiden, now fully fledged surgeon, giving a handout on the team. Never lost his enthusiasm for the sport of cycling, the great speed skater of Lake Placid in 1980, and then of course a sprint winner in the Tour of Italy as a pro bike rider.
Little acceleration there coming from Armstrong, I think, just to see if everybody's paying attention. But I do feel that we're going to see a big attack as we come into the final lap here. There are two big climbs on the final 40-kilometre circuit, and I'm sure we'll see somebody trying to break this field apart. And I reckon the important thing for these riders is to try and get rid of Oscar Freire, because if they carry him to the finish, he's the most certain winner.
Just over 5 hours completed, the circuit taking just on the hour to get round, so we're looking at time at about 6 hours 8 minutes. And the breakaway now more concerned with each other, I think, than what is going on behind. The peloton here has seen better days, and I would think when they go through the start-finishing line, they're going to plan on dropping out, at least some of them, because they're not making too much pace now.
This is the group of Eric Zabel. Zabel really needs to try and get some points in an event like this and Paris Tours if he's going to run out the overall winner of the World Cup this year. But these are not really the races that suit him, Phil, and he has to go out in races like Paris Tours and just make sure he keeps himself regularly in the points. And what a season that would be for him if he could take the green jersey at the Tour de France and the World Cup title as well.
That'd be wonderful, but the one thing that will give him some consolation is the fact that Andre Schmil, his nearest challenger and World Cup holder, is also in that group with him. So neither are going to score much, even if they pull off the win in the sprint. The best they can hope for now, I think, is a couple of points in the competition.
Not very many riders left in this main peloton right now, and it seems as if the drive really has gone out, and it's all, Phil, really because of the names in that front group. A lot of them probably wishing they were down here right now alongside the Zurich Zazé, having a nice rest in the sun and just taking a day off from the bike riding.
It looks absolutely idyllic here. Some of the finest cyclists in the world passing by just yards away, and the sun rays are more important to some people. As the race goes by, they can't leave anyway, of course, because the roads are all shut down today. That's underneath what will be the kilometre banner. But right now the bunch making the way towards the end of the penultimate lap. Still a long way behind. The leaders are now heading out towards the first climb on the last circuit.
Well, as soon as these riders come up to the line, that looks like Axel Merckx on the front of the main field. He isn't going to put much of an effort into trying to pull back that deficit because he's got his man Oscar Freire in the front group. The main field now going through the feeding station, and when they come up to the line, Phil, I reckon we will see a deficit of well over 3 minutes.
Yeah, I think it might be even more than that now. Remember too that Bartoli is somewhere in no man's land, or cameras haven't shown him for a while, but he's up there. There's Axel Merckx, the champion of Belgium, in that black top to his jersey. Boys making quick snatches, taking on food, so at least this lot are planning on the last circuit.
The man on the front there is Luca Shinto. A new hairdo for Luca Shinto, one of the top domestiques on the circuit. A very good friend of Maximilian Chiandri's here, just ticking away on the front of the main field. Axel Merckx, resplendent in his Belgian national champions jersey, and there is Andre Schmeel. Right on his wheel is Eric Zabel. Zabel will watch this man very closely over the next couple of races. The difference between them at the moment is well over 100 points. But, you know, there's 100 points for a win in these World Cup races, so one win by Andre Schmeel could bring him right back into the chances.
There is still very much time here. Schmeel has indicated he does not want to be selected for the Olympic Games for Belgium. He's concentrating on his World Cup defence and the possible World Championship. There's the gap going to the clock, holding at about 4:17.
It's going to be very difficult for these guys to pull back anything like that because all of the big teams are represented in the front and there's no real reason for the main field to chase. I think they will ride round and maybe have a slight flurry for the lesser points at the moment, which is why Eric Zabel really has to stay in the bike race right now.
Still the same names at the front, 8 of them. Sitting at the back more often than not is the world champion, still living in hope that the man chasing in the gap is around about a minute and a quarter back, not much more than that, Michele Bartoli.
Well, that actually gives the advantage to the Mapei squad because Oscar Freire can sit back. He doesn't have to contribute now to the success of this breakaway. He can only hope that his teammate will come back. Team Telecom, though, have been pretty active in sending their team manager forward to have a word with Jan Ullrich. In the car today is Walter Godefroot. He'll be talking to Jan Ullrich and maybe trying to ascertain whether they should launch an attack. And I would think if I was team manager in the car now, I would try and keep the group together as much as possible and then launch the big attack on the final climb of the day, that climb up to the Fansteel.
Still the same riders setting the pace, still Freire playing ticket collector here. Heading up towards the climb, the first climb of the Fourche, or the last climb. Well, last time we'll see this climb today. And this is absolutely beautiful. It's the sort of weather that will suit the Swiss riders. It's nice to see 2 of the Swiss boys getting into the breakaway here. The Italians can also expect some home support. Ullrich sitting through on the inside. He's going to be the rider I think they will fear. But I don't know. Ullrich, for me, isn't the type of rider to win in this sort of company unless he can get away on the climb itself.
Well, I would put my big favourite down here as Francesco Casagrande, because although he did ride a very good Giro d'Italia this year, holding the pink jersey almost from the midpoint to the penultimate day, he is also a very good tactician. He knows exactly how to go out on the attack and put the attack in at the right time. He will be thinking about the attack on that final climb of the day, Phil. He's the man I think we'll see coming to the front first, trying to blow the race apart. They realise they have to get rid of Oscar Freire, and Freire over the next 10 kilometres or so will just take advantage of the fact that Michele Bartoli is chasing in the group behind. But they want to be careful at moments like this, because coming into the latter part of the race, when those gaps appear on these slight inclines, it's very difficult to pull back.
A word of advice at the back here for David Rebellin, as the world champion and the ex-world champion cameras in, split the gap closed. Rebellin just rides back up there. Rider who has promised a lot, hasn't quite delivered the goods yet, David Rebellin, but he's a very good bike rider. Because of his consistency, he rides very high in the world rankings.
Well, he had a brilliant season in 1977 when he took out not only this race but also the San Sebastian Classic, and went pretty close to taking out the World Cup with that very final late season burst. The big surprise in this group, as you say, is Andrei Kivilev, wearing number 16 there, one of the great Kazakhstan team that turned professional and scattered themselves amongst all of the European teams. A quick look here at Michele Bartoli. Bartoli now returning to the form that made him one of the top contenders in the world, and a man who I think is going to be an almost certain favourite for the Olympic Games and the World Championships at the end of the season, because he came through the Tour de France, Phil. He's got over that problem he had from the crash in 1999 where he exploded his kneecap, and now I think every year he's getting better. In fact, they've pulled back just a little bit, 52 seconds now, but really there doesn't seem to be the urgency in this group.
Well, it's close, but he's having to do an awful lot of work. Oscar Freire playing the faithful teammate, even though he is the world champion up the road. Not helping that escape at all. We're now on to the lower slopes of the Fourche. 10% gradient, 1 in 10, very consistent all the way up for the best part of 4.5 kilometres.
It's a very long climb, but I do feel the worst is the final climb of the day, because that goes up in 2 steps. It climbs up and you think you've reached the top, it drops down just a little bit, and then it kicks up again at around about 7%.
Back up with the leaders, higher up the same climb now, and receiving the cheers of a lot of cycling enthusiasts enjoying the summer's day. Still, it's Ulrich setting the pace. Armstrong riding him close and giving a little bit of a kick here, and nobody, it seems, able to follow Lance's wheel.
Armstrong looking good. He's got that suppleness that took him to the top of many of the Tour de France mountains. Ulrich looking over his shoulder. This is almost a return to the Tour de France just a month ago, as we look at the riders who are really thrashing it out over the Alpine passes. Ulrich, though, Phil, looks very strong indeed. The huge gear that he's ticking over right now shows that he's got big power. And Armstrong himself looking as relaxed as he did on the Alpine and Pyrenean passes.
Oh, the check bikes on the roof here of US Postal, a word in the ear of Lance. He showed us there he had a turn of speed that hurt Rebellin, who didn't rush to close that gap. But they've all got back together now as they start the descent here off the top of the Fourche.
Well, Johan Brunel very nervous in the team car there, trying to come forward all the time. I wonder what he wants to talk to Armstrong. In fact, is calling him forward right now. He's got his arm up there. I hope he doesn't have a problem with a wheel. I think it may well just be a little bit of tactical talk that he wants. Takes on board a cold drink for the final few kilometres of the bike race. But he is, Phil, looking very relaxed indeed. And who knows, this is a race. Armstrong tends to go back in the history of his career. He went back, having finished last in San Sebastian, to come back and win it a few years later. This was his first success in a World Cup in the Championship of Zurich, and maybe he's thinking about taking out the win here.
And Armstrong, not too far away now from his 29th birthday. Professional at the back end of 92 after the Barcelona Olympics, which a performance which didn't please him. And the result before the end of that season with a fine second place in this event.
Well, I'm surprised he wasn't happy with that performance. He was 14th in that Olympic Games, and really anybody else would have been pretty pleased with that. But he'd built himself up psychologically to win that race, and I think it was somewhat of a deception.
Well, I can remember working at the time for NBC television in the States, and boy, they really put pressure on him with all the things they were saying about him, how well he would do. And I think anything less than a gold medal was seen as pretty much a failure. But what a career he's had since then in many, many ways. We'll experience the odd picture breakup. As always, it's the signals going from the motorbikes up to the helicopters. So bear with us. Nothing wrong with the footage or your tape, by the way. It's just simply a problem with the transmission.
It always seems to be worse on these urban circuits because we're in and out of very high built-up areas, and the trees also breaking up that microwave signal there. Oscar Freire, for the moment, Phil, is looking pretty comfortable at the back of this group, just sitting there, allowing all of the other riders to do the work. He's going to try and hang on over the final climb of the day, and if he does, I think that's the man I would go out now and just put a few bob on.
Well, this course is not flat in very few. Is flat in very few places. We're heading over the top of the Fourche now. It doesn't stay flat though. It undulates, as you can see, as we get down to the far end of the course down at Esslingen, and then we'll turn and head up into the climb of the Pfannenstiel.
This is one of the riders from the Michele Bartoli group trying to get across, and it looked very much to me as if that was Daniele De Paoli. He's got a lot of power here, but if they want to get across, they really need to work together as a unit. And the fact that he was riding off the front of the group shows to me that they are losing their impetus. The last time check we got was pretty close to 1 minute, and I think these riders will certainly fade away from the top.
Yes, Massimiliano Cingana at the back here, gritting his teeth and hanging on to Bartoli. This group is now losing ground. In fact, it hasn't had a good climb of the Fourche, and it is now outside a minute. It was 52 seconds, you may recall, at the start. Bartoli himself seems to now feel that the fish have gone, and he's not going to reel them in.
It's a pity for him because his form is excellent right now. The other man in that group of 5 riders is Mikel Zarbaitia. Looking up the long road there, you can see no sign at all of that leading group of riders. They're round the corner, but I'll tell you one thing, that is around about a kilometre distance. And on a slope like this, it's going to be very difficult for them to pull it back.
Yeah, I reckon they've lost about 10 seconds on the climb to the leaders, and not in least due possibly to that surge by Armstrong just before the top of the Fourche. They've been tenacious. They are the only riders now within minutes of the leaders, but they've really got to make a huge effort. And I can't see, with this quality of breakaway, anybody coming back. Heading down to Zummerken now.
Zummerken is a small town in the outskirts of Zurich. This race moving away from the Zurich-Zazay over the 2 climbs and then finishing right in the very heart of Zurich. And you can see in the group now, Phil, that they've really picked up the pace, and they're trying to toughen it up before they come to the final climb of the day. Rebellin looking very concentrated indeed. And still at the back, Oscar Freire, Laurent Dufaux moving forward now. And this is the time when Oscar Freire has to pay attention, because if there is a gap on one of these slight inclines, it's going to be very difficult to pull back. Armstrong out of the saddle, still that very high cadence of his, keeping him nice and relaxed on his machine. He'll be thinking also of the point to attack. This is a very different circuit to the one where he finished second back in 1992, and that in fact finished out on the road. He was beaten by his own teammate Yaroslav Ekimov. They weren't teammates at the time, but now Ekimov rides alongside Armstrong, and I think was a great domestique for Armstrong during the Tour de France. Ekimov, one of the fastest men in the world at one time on the track, a brilliant bike rider, and still riding very well now.
Yes, Lance and Slava seem to be pretty good friends and back in the fold as far as Lance is concerned. Ekimov given a contract back with US Postal this season. Cheers all the way for the elite of cycling. The world champion is now driving. I wonder if word has reached him to forget Michele Bartoli, because he's now working.
Well, all these riders now, Phil, as we've seen so often over the past couple of years, are in radio communication with the team management, and I think that indicates that the word must have come forward. He's looking over his shoulder, but I think the word has come forward from Patrick Lefevre in the team car to say, well, forget it, Michele Bartoli is not coming back right now. Play your own card.
Yeah, I think you're right. Still, I think I might use that as an excuse for a while longer, because there's still the climbs to come. Armstrong, however, taking his pace at the back, having done his pace at the front, and it looks as though Oscar Freire is now taking part in the bike race here. We'll lose sight of them for a moment. You really would get some picture breakup if our motorbike camera tried to shoot from inside that tunnel.
Once again, the time gap increasing, 1:05 back to the group there with Michele Bartoli. I think the race is over for the 5 chasers. Bartoli just missing out, and once you see that group, again, you'll see that there is no real impetus in them. They're trying to survive, and I think the only thing they can hope for now is to stay off the front of the main pack, which at the last time check was pretty close to 4.5 minutes in arrears.
Yeah, they're out of it now, and Zabel keeping control of Schmil. I don't think he'll be too unhappy with the way this has gone. It's not the sort of course he excels on, and his main rival is trapped with him in what's left of the peloton anyway. Just waiting for the riders to settle down after coming through that tunnel. Here they come. The helicopter doing a nice job at hovering.
It's actually always
sorry, Paul. Yeah.
It's always a very difficult race to cover this for the television as well, because we're so close to the Zurich International Airport, and they have to keep a very close eye on the helicopter shots, because occasionally they come pretty close to the flight plan of the Zurich Airport. and it's always difficult organising events like this around Zurich. And the fact, as you mentioned earlier, this is probably one of the only races in the year where they actually close down the roads in Switzerland for a bike race. The only other time they do it is when the Tour de France makes an incursion into this country.
Quite right. Roman Weinstein's in this breakaway as well, the impressive Latvian rider. But it looks as though they've all decided now it's not going to be their day today. They're racing at the minute for 9th place. As we go back up to the leaders now, still the same names on the front.
Remarkable list of names as well. Any one of these riders would be top 10 contenders at the Tour de France, and in fact Ulrich and Armstrong already victors at that great event.
Indeed, Ulrich though having only won one race this year, although he's been threatening, and not least of course his second overall in the Tour de France, in which his reputation goes before him. Oscar Freire, 6 wins as world champion this year, and it's not over yet, I don't think.
Well, that victory just a couple of weeks ago by Jan Ullrich in the Coppa Agostini was a pretty impressive victory as well. That's a very tough event in Italy, and he took the Italians really to hand in their own country there. And there's a race that in the past has really been very much dominated by the Italians and used to be a huge build-up race for the World Championships when the World Championships was at a reasonable time of the year. I still feel that it's very difficult for these riders, especially names like Armstrong and Ullrich, to keep themselves fit for a World Championships, which this year is going to be pushed back to almost the end of October.
This race, which became known as the Grand Prix of Switzerland for a little while, and that was when Ullrich had his 2nd place in it. That would have been back in 1997, I think. 97, and he now they've secured really good sponsorship in this race. It is safe for the next 2 or 3 years with big time sponsors involved, which is great news for Swiss cycling too. And they're noted for the high standard of organisation because, as you know, Switzerland is a very well organised country, and all of the riders like racing here, and certainly today they've put themselves all in the breakaway.
I suppose you could say it's organised like clockwork.
Indeed you could, Paul, yes.
But these guys now, they're not thinking about clocks, although maybe the man who runs out the winner here will be looking to buy himself a nice clock at the duty-free shop at the airport, because Zurich, Switzerland, not a part of the European community. This is still a place where you can buy duty-free goods, and it certainly would be the place if you want to pick up a nice Rolex watch, and that seems to be a very popular item with a lot of these bike riders. Armstrong thinking now about the final climb of the day. You see 1 or 2 riders, Phil, now starting to throw off their bottles. That's much more psychological than anything else, as they try to lighten the load before the final climb of the day, because I'm certain now we're going to see somebody try and split this group. 8 riders going to the finish is almost unheard of in a race of this caliber. A little chat here for Dufault.
Dufault, quick word and back on, because we're not far from starting this climb, I don't think. Lovely blue skies, been a glorious day. 188 kilometres was the decisive point when the big boys put the hammer down. Bartoli must have been having tea because he missed it. He's tried to make amends, but he's not going to get up now.
The race for Michele Bartoli is all over, but you can see the heat has actually been pretty difficult. 2 guys at the back here actually shaking their legs. A little bit of cramp may be coming into the thighs of Jan Ullrich. He's been using a huge gear throughout the afternoon. Looking over his shoulder there, getting down into that time trial position. A position which earned him a world time trial title last year. And certainly he, along with Lance Armstrong, have got to be super favourites for the Olympic Games individual time trial in Sydney in around about 6 weeks' time.
When you see guys right at the back flexing the muscles like this, to me it's usually the prelude to an attack. 1:44 they've gone out to now, so forget Michele Bartoli and Weinsteins and the rest. They're out of it. These boys know that the steady pace at the front has paid off for them today. Nobody's attacked each other. They've just kept the tempo. Andrei Kovalev in the best move of his career so far. Never won a race yet as a pro. 3rd season. He went to turn pro for Festina when he won the Commonwealth Bank Cycle Classic in Australia. His last race as an amateur when he rode for his country, Kazakhstan.
Pretty remarkable group this as well. It's very international, not dominated by any nation at all. 2 Italians in the group, 2 Swiss, an American, a rider from Kazakhstan, a German, and 1 Spaniard. So it just reflects the depth of the world of international cycling these days. It used to be looking at a situation like this where you'd have 7 Italians in a break of 9. But right now the sport really has leveled out, I think, and we're seeing a lot wider challenge coming from countries like Spain. In the past, the Spanish teams really never rivaled in the one-day races, and now they've got a man like Oscar Freire, who it won't be too long, Phil, I don't think, before he gets himself a World Cup win.
I think you're right. It wouldn't be Zurich, would it, without seeing the old trams churning down the side of the road. It's a beautiful city. Even though it is a city, it seems to be so uncrowded and uncomplicated. Here's Bartoli. Looks as though somebody spilled the pots of paint over his shorts, and there's good reason for that, of course, as he continues now knowing that he's racing for 9th place today.
Well, it's all important for him psychologically. He's in great form after the Tour de France. I was very impressed with the way he handled many of those mountain passes, and I think next year he will go to the Tour de France with a slightly different preparation, with the hope of getting himself onto the top 3 in the finish in Paris. Mikel Zarbaitia, former top star from the Banesto team in Spain, a man that many people thought would be a great contender at the Tour de France if he hadn't had that serious problem with his back. But this group, you can see, Phil, they're not getting their backs into it right now. They're really a group of survivors. They just want to stay off the front of the main field. They've ridden hard. They tried to get themselves up to that leading group of 8, but they know now that they've failed.
Their only hope now is to stay away from the field. I don't think that'll be a problem, frankly. And Bartoli, though, is having a very solid season of redemption after last year and his accident in the Tour of Germany. It's been a toughie for him. He seemed to start well with a win in February, but then I think it all came too soon. He went out of it for a while, had to pack in his campaign for the World Cups in Belgium, etc. Now he's coming back good, and it will be wonderful, especially as he's now won the Italian title, to go on and pick up the Olympic title. What an end of season that would be.
Oscar Freire moving off the front there now, taking a little bit more interest in the work being done at the front of this group of 8 riders. Armstrong now riding much further to the back, keeping an eye, I think, on the other riders just to try and determine who is the strongest guy in this group. He'll keep a pretty close eye, I would think, on Francesco Casagrande in the pale blue jersey of Vinny Calderillo. He's the man who I think is going to be the first man to launch an attack on that climb. Very confident in the attack that he put in the Tour of Italy this year to take the pink jersey, and maybe he should have attacked once or twice more, because if he had done, he would have opened up a bigger gap over his other challengers, and he should have run out of the winner of that race. But what a shame for him to lose it on the penultimate day.
Absolutely. That's tough, but then he got the King of the Mountains award somewhat by default,
well, I don't
with
think that
all
was
of
very
the
fair.
times on it.
Very unfair, that. I think that was a little bit misunderstanding by the Italian organisation there, and I think if they'd had any thought about it, they would have awarded 2 King of the Mountains jerseys, because to me the best climber in the bike race really was Kepe Gonzalez.
Absolutely. Casagrande, though, wouldn't give his jersey back, so he's run out, and records will show him as the winner on the very last climb of the Giro d'Italia, because he was the one that put one of the little transponders onto his bike, and the rules were you don't have to put them on, but if you do put them on, that's where we're taking the information from. That was in the time trial. This breakaway group doesn't look quick, does it, yet? It's averaged around 41 kilometres an hour just by helping each other out, not attacking each other, and letting the whole of the field in the Grand Prix of Zurich fall back now to more than 10 minutes behind, with that Bartoli group in between. And it looks to me as though we might even be pulling the tram back here.
They may well not have missed the train this time. That train may be slowing down to get a chance to have a view at some of the best bike riders in the world. Armstrong, Phil, is looking pretty nervous right now. He's still got a lot of agility, still got a lot of fluidity in the upper part of his body, and I would think he will be itching for the first move. I don't think he'll be the man to attack on the climb here. I think he will play a defensive role. He's fairly confident with his sprinting ability, and so I think he will be looking for somebody else to attack and try and follow the move, which I feel certain will split this group.
Everybody watching out the tram windows there. The proof of the pudding that it's faster by bike as the leaders go by the tram, which is one of the most efficient ways of transport around Switzerland, particularly here in the Zurich region. They've changed direction now. Every turn of the course is taking them that little bit closer to the big climb of the day, where there must be an attack Otherwise, they'll take it to the sprinters, and then we should see somebody like Oscar Freire taking on perhaps Jan Ullrich in the sprint.
Well, the Bartoli group going even further back, 2 minutes behind right now. The car trying to get into the action right now is driven by Vincent Lavenue, the team manager of the AG2R team, and his man Andrei Kivilev is in the group. We're on the foot now of the very long Farnsteel climb, 6 kilometers in length. The steepest part, Phil, 15%, and we go up 227 meters in altitude. This, I think, is where the race must certainly split.
And look at the length of it too. This is 6 kilometers, this climb. Plenty of time to ride men off your wheel if you've got the strength to keep going. Anxious to keep the pace up at this stage, using his big ring, is Casagrande, a known climber, remember. Oscar Camazin, not such a hot climber, although he does pretty well in the Tour of Italy on the mountains.
Camazin's only win this year, the overall victory in his own country's national tour, the Tour of Switzerland. But there, Francesco Casagrande looking very cool indeed, very much at ease. Armstrong in a slightly bigger gear than the one he's used to, and the huge gear of Jan Ullrich at the back of this group.
And somebody gone there. And in fact, yes, the man who's missing is Kivilev. Been dropped immediately. He must have said, as soon as I come to that climb, it's curtains, because he's made no effort to match the pace here. Now he's gone off with a 4-minute buffer over the next group and 10 or 12 minutes over the field. If he can hang on, he's going to get a good result even so. It'll have to be 8th place now, because this is such a long climb. Even if he recovers, he's not going to get back on.
Absolutely not. That's very much what my old friend Ferdy Vandenhout, the former winner of Ghent-Wevelgem, would say, boom, boom, and out go the lights.
I'm afraid so. Still, you save on electricity.
Absolutely. Armstrong looking very confident now, though, Phil. Camazin taking over. If you look, though, in 4th position there at Francesco Casagrande, he's looking twitchy now. He's the man I'm certain is going to attack as soon as we get to the steeper part of this climb. This climb starts off at a 12% gradient, then there's a slight descent in the middle part of it, then it kicks up at 15%, and that's where I think the attacks will come.
They're taking much closer order here now, and they're no longer helping one another. They're just riding through and off. Casagrande is always a front runner on mountains. He likes to set the pace, which he can handle himself, and that's what he's doing here alongside David Rebellin. Rebellin himself, a former leader for a number of days in the Giro d'Italia, is certainly an above-average climber, and this sort of course won't be too hilly for him in any way whatsoever. But it seems to me that these 7 riders are very evenly matched. 11% just here, and 1 in 9 that is, and it looks to me as though they're all pretty much on a par.
Well, that's after 220 kilometers of racing, and that's pretty much 5.5 hours in the saddle. The car's all going by Andrei Kivilev right now. He's just hoping to survive, but there's still around about 4 kilometers of climbing to go to the finish. And talking about climbers in this group, the man in the red jersey there, Phil, Laurent Dufaux, not a great one-day bike rider, but certainly a man who rides well in the overall standings of the major 3-week tours. He too will be very much at home on this slope.
Ullrich and Casagrande, the masters of the big gears, churning their top chain wheels, while the world champion Freire has dropped down onto the inside ring along with Laurent Dufaux, and I'm quite sure Lance Armstrong. But just look at the gears that Casagrande rides, and then another shot here at the gears that Ullrich rides.
Ullrich's a big, strong boy. Comes off the Tour de France, finishing 2nd overall, but in great shape. And I think that bodes well for his end of the season. He'll go to the Tour of Spain and then go on to Sydney for the Olympic Games, and he's going to be a very difficult man to beat. Armstrong not riding the Tour of Spain this year, and I think that is an error, because I think he needs, with the season that he's had, to go forward and at least have 10 or 12 days hard competition on the run.
Well, the sun is getting right overhead of the riders now, heading up towards late afternoon here in Switzerland. 21 kilometers from the finish.
Casagrande's always the man at the front, very happy to set the tempo, feeling very confident that he's got the makings of this breakaway group here right now. Camazin taking a lot more turns at the back here. I think he's starting to suffer quite a bit. Otherwise, he's waiting to try and get to the steepest part of the climb and then launch the attack. But I do feel that the attack has to come from Casagrande, who is looking pretty good right now. He looks like the strongest and most relaxed bike rider in the group, and a fast acceleration may well catch out Jan Ullrich, because he is using a monster gear right now.
Well, Ullrich looks very cool, I have to say too. So too does Laurent Dufaux, who's looking as though he's going with every move here. looking quite cool. His image somewhat tarnished since his involvement in the Festina affair a couple of years ago, but he's working hard to replace that. And he's certainly had a poor season thus far with his problem with his prostrate of all things, which is rather a young age to get that. It would more suit somebody like Paul Sherwin or Phil Liggett, I would think.
Well, in the background there, the Zurichse See. Just at the top end of the Zurichse See is the city of Zurich, where these riders will be charging down to in around about half an hour's time. Just over 20 kilometers of racing. This is the flattest part of this hill now, Phil, and it will now start to kick up a final time, and they'll come to the 15% gradient, as it's still Francesco Casagrande there on the front for Vinny Calderillo, looking very comfortable. Not a problem at all for him. Armstrong is now being a little bit more attentive, moving up into second place, and Laurent Dufaux, although he looked fairly comfortable now, is putting his head down, looking at his gears. I think he's been put into difficulty by the pressure being put on at the front.
Well, poor old Andrei Kivilev now tailed off as the road has gone right and left and continued to climb. These roads here on this course by tradition are narrow, and also beautiful roads, by the way, if you're ever cycling in Switzerland when they are open to motor cars, because believe me, you won't see too many, because this is a beautiful area, largely unpopulated, and a cycling paradise. Not a difficult course around this area, at least, to close down.
Strange to see Casagrande just setting the tempo on the front like that, because really with a group of riders like this, he needs to just ease off slightly and then try and surprise them with an acceleration. What he's trying to do right now is actually ride them off his wheel, and you don't do that with men like Jan Ullrich and Lance Armstrong. The way to get rid of them is to actually accelerate.
Well, Casagrande, the former world champion, and the current world champion Oscar Freire, both looking a little overweight really from the rear view, but that's a little unkind. It takes a couple of years to slim down to somebody like Lance Armstrong. He's heading up to his 29th birthday next month.
Ullrich now taking up the pace, making at the front. He doesn't want it to slow down at all. You can see the smaller gear being used here by Laurent Dufaux. I think he's riding much more on pride now than anything else. Suffering, racing in his home country's World Cup event. The expression on the face completely different to that of Ullrich. Ullrich pulling his zip down a little bit. It's very hot out here, 25 degrees Celsius at the moment. That's pretty close to 85 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's never very long, Phil, before Francesco Casagrande comes to the front. Very strange style. He sits quite upright there, the position of a climber, completely different to the position here of Oscar Freire, the man who is the fastest sprinter in this group.
Armstrong, late decision to ride. It's paid off for him. He's made the decisive move. He's still working very hard as they sort of continue their journey over the top of the Pfannenstiel, but he continues to climb. It's a very difficult stretch of road, continues to sort of rise and fall.
There's an attack there. Casagrande is attacked. This is the time I was expecting Francesco Casagrande to try and launch an attack, but he hasn't caught them unawares. They've all lifted the pace. Dufaux's in second position, Oscar Freire there in third.
Didn't seem a great place to go for me. He's had better chances to go than that. He's got Rebellin in a bit of trouble at the back. I don't know whether he knows it at this stage. The motorbikes, as usual, getting in the way. And that attack coming when nobody really expected it in the lead convoy. It's not a good pace. Lovely tempo, though, by Casagrande. But just look at this. Laurent Dufaux has marked him without any problem whatsoever.
And Oscar Freire has cracked. Freire is the man going backwards there. Armstrong in a little bit of difficulty has seen the move. He is trying to ride across there. Rebellin is away as well. The man in the middle now forcing the pressure was Jan Ullrich, and it would happen right in the middle of the forest. We can't get down there with the cameras because of all the picture breakup, but it looked very much as if Laurent Dufaux was there alongside Jan Ullrich and Francesco Casagrande.
Well, we now know who the strength is in this breakaway. Those three riders opening a little gap, but remember, if they don't get away on the climb, you can bet your bottom dollar back will come Armstrong, Rebellin and Oscar Freire. And then and Armstrong is not waiting for that. He's gone across anyway. Four of them are up there now. Ullrich setting the pace with Casagrande, Dufaux and Armstrong are ridden across the gap with a lot of confidence, I think.
big pressure on for this man, Oscar Freire. He can see the riders up the road, but they know he's a good sprinter, and this is the man they really wanted to get rid of. On his wheel there is Oscar Kamenzin wearing number 71. Hope for Switzerland, but they've also got hope in the front in the form of Laurent Dufaux. I don't think he's going to get too much help here as we look now at the leading group. These are the three strong men. Armstrong was actually caught out, and Rebellin has come back as well now, so 5 riders at the front.
Well, I'm amazed. Unfortunately, because of the cameras being down in the trees there, we didn't see how Rebellin did that. But the last time we saw him, he seemed to be in trouble with the Casagrande attack. Anyway, he's gone round the world champion and the former world champion and come up to the leaders. 5 great climbers here on a climb like this anyway.
They certainly need to put some time between themselves and Oscar Freire, and I think that is why these riders are now working together on the slopes. Bit of chaos out there. Everybody wants to get in and see the crucial attack, because most of those cameramen feel that there is going to be another attack from this group. But these guys are so well matched right now. We're talking a real heads of states. 2 winners of the Tour de France, a man who led the Giro d'Italia this year for almost 12 days. And the power of Jan Ullrich, he wants to blow everybody away.
Oh, absolutely frightening. I know that Armstrong rates this man as the finest rider. I don't think anybody could disagree with that. If he's got his legs, he is the best rider in the world on form. There's no question. And little Laurent Dufaux is going to take a lot of confidence in the fact that it looks as though Rebellin's going as I speak, but Dufaux is going to take confidence in the fact he's Swiss. Now, Rebellin did a great ride to get up there. Now he's having to do a great ride to stay there.
Well, Ullrich has actually put the hammer down again. He's opening up a gap now. He's going through those motorbikes, and they are causing chaos in this bike race. This is actually falsifying the race right now. Ullrich is the man trying to open up the gap. Trying to chase him down is Francesco Casagrande. Armstrong has been dropped as well. Dufaux there is in 3rd place, right on the wheel of Casagrande. Now Armstrong and Rebellin are together. They've only got around about a kilometre to go to the summit, and this man has flown.
Well, you know, the motorbikes should be shot for that, because they just got in the way of everything there. They should expect attacks to accelerate and not just stay in amongst the riders for the shot of the day. Armstrong was also blocked there. You may have seen he went up behind the motorbike that wasn't going anywhere, and he had to brake and pull round it, and the gap was open. Over the top now, Jan Ullrich, the brilliant Ullrich, being chased back by these two, Casagrande and Dufaux. Ullrich is caught again, so now it's between 3 on the rundown.
Well, if they have only got an advantage at the moment of around about 15 seconds over Armstrong and Rebellin, they need to work together, because otherwise Armstrong will come back. I don't think Laurent Dufaux is too happy to work in this group right now. He realises that the 2 strong men are Jan Ullrich and Francesco Casagrande. You see his turns a little bit weaker than that of the other 2. He will allow them now to do the pacemaking. This is the 2nd group on the road. This is the 3rd group on the road. This is Oscar Freire and Kamenzin.
And behind these 2, we'll find somewhere languishing in the middle of Kivilev. It looks as though Kamezin's glad the climb is over. Now Freire fancies his chances still if he can get himself back into time trial mode. There's a little pan back. There's the 2 chasers. Ahead of him is Armstrong, and then in front of that is the leading trio of Dufaux, Casagrande, Ullrich. Dufaux, by the way, 8 times he's ridden the Tour de France, gave up this year on the 13th stage, unlucky for some. He's twice finished 4th. He's much more noted as a stage rider than a single day rider, and he's got himself some hot company now.
Well, he's actually come to the front, but I think the strongest man in this group right now really is Jan Ullrich in the pink and white jersey of Team Telecom. The man that he's going to have to try and outwit at the end is going to be Francesco Casagrande, and Laurent Dufaux along here for the ride. Dufaux was very attentive on the climb. He was on the right wheels at the right time when that acceleration came, and the gap now back to Armstrong Phil is starting to open. I make that around about 15 seconds.
Casagrande had a little bit of a rest day since the 2nd place in the Giro. He's got 20 seconds lead over the chasing 2. He's just won a couple of criteriums since he finished 2nd in the Giro d'Italia. Now he's trying to bring his form back up for the Olympics, and it looks as though he might have judged it to perfection.
It's going to be quite difficult for Armstrong to get back on here, because this is not really a descent. It's a gradual decline as we come off the top of that mountain. If it had been a tough technical descent, I think Armstrong would have got back quite quickly, because he's very good on the downhill parts of these courses. Much better, in fact, than Jan Ullrich, who always seems a little bit precarious on his machine when he finds himself faced with a very technical descent.
These are the 2 chasers. Lance Armstrong getting himself back onto form for his important rendezvous in Australia, a country he's never raced in. as they continue running away now from the climb, heading down towards the side of the Zürichsee, Lake Zurich. It's just down over the horizon, and the leading group on that last climb split asunder by 3 strong men.
That gap looks as if it's extended further than the 20 seconds, and 20 seconds further behind those 2 riders are Oscar Freire and Davide Rebellin.
Motorbike wants to get through again as Casagrande leads through Dufaux, who's beginning to get a little feeling of goose flesh, I would think, because he's right in at the kill here in his own country in a race which every Swiss rider wants to win.
Ulrich looking very calm. I think he feels as if he's got the makings of this group. He's an incredible bike rider, and all of the other bike riders on the international circuit rate him as the most talented bike rider on the circuit right now. Comes from the former East German cycling school that was based in Berlin, but actually was born in Roscoff and moved to the former East German capital to be part of that great school of cycling, where he made great friends with Erik Zabel. 2 different kinds of bike riders though, because Ulrich certainly is an incredible talent, but has a problem in keeping his form, and I think the fact that he's come off the Tour de France in 2nd position will set him up for a good end of season.
So the 2nd in the Tour de France, the 2nd in the Giro d'Italia, and the Swiss rider at the back here, Dufaux, who must know that the Swiss have never won this race since 1981. Be it Breur, who was also a very good cyclo-cross rider. He was the winner then. And no Swiss riders even broken into the top 3 since Tony Rominger back in 1988. So at least that's going to happen now.
Rebellin didn't look too good there. He was coming forward to try and help Armstrong a bit, but these 3 riders spread across the road right now. If they start to play around tactically, this is the time when I think Armstrong may well reintegrate the front group. But Ulrich, Phil, look at that. He's very confident. Right on the front is Francesco Casagrande, currently ranked number 1 in the world. Number 2 in the world is Jan Ullrich, and Ullrich looks the most powerful rider in this group.
Well, let's hope at 79 Dufaux doesn't get a complex here, but he's certainly working hard now. This rider has given it everything to be in at the move, probably making an effort on the climb there he would not have made in any other country but his own. Casagrande, though, is determined to get a result today, and he's got to be the big danger. But you can't ever write off Jan Ullrich, who I think will rely on the sprint. I don't think now he'll try and attack.
Well, in his amateur days, we saw him race in 93 and 94 in the Commonwealth Bank Cycle Classic in Australia, and I tell you what, he won an awful lot of sprints. Nowadays, he's much more interested in working for Erik Zabel when it comes to the big sprints in races like the Tour de France, but he has got a very fast finish. The big problem, though, Phil, is it's a 3-man finish, and that's always very difficult at the end of a 240-kilometre race, because it's a difficult race to set up. You don't have a teammate to lead you out. You have to take the responsibility of starting the sprint yourself, and that's why there are very often surprises.
That's the aggression on the face of Ullrich, the effort on the face of Dufaux. Ullrich just seems to have everything so much under control. Took the corner a bit wide there, but he made it okay. Back at the front now, the big gear here. It looks like a 55 chain wheel that's being turned there by Casagrande. It's huge.
Absolutely massive. They're urging Dufaux to come forward. They want to try and make sure that Armstrong doesn't come back to the group, and also Rebellin, who is with him. I think we've seen the end of Oscar Freire, who at the moment is at around about 50 seconds behind. This is the next group on the road, Armstrong and Rebellin. Rebellin, looking at his pedalling action there, seems to have lost a bit. They are losing ground. 37 seconds now as opposed to 20 seconds at the last time check.
Yeah, and this road deceptive. It's actually slightly uphill here. One of those horrible little roads at this stage of the race when your bike seems stuck to it and you can't get any speed out of it. And Armstrong, seemingly the man who has to do all of the pacemaking there. Rebellin, a little bit of a passenger.
3 leaders. Ullrich leading them down. He always looks a little bit risky to me on the descents. He's such a big bike rider, and his movements are not as fluid in the corners as some other riders are going around these bends like this. He's leading them down because he wants to pick the line that he wants.
Absolutely. He can also slow them down as well, because some of the corners he's going around here, he gets a bit of a speed wobble on. He uses his brakes at precisely the wrong moment. He's not a fluid descender at all.
Casagrande urgently coming to the front again. I think he feels now that he has got a great chance of taking this win. He's won single-day races before. He won the San Sebastian Classic a couple of years ago, and it was just after that that news came through that he was tested positive for a high testosterone level. He's been trying to put all of that behind him for many years now, and he was hoping this year he would have taken out victory at the Giro d'Italia. Led that race until the penultimate day, when he got blown away in that incredible final time trial.
Dufaux now, he needs to play a lower profile, I think, because he's got to rely on some sort of surprise. He's not a bad sprinter from a group like this. He's not a renowned sprinter, but he's not bad. 65 kilometers an hour. In fact, all three of these riders, not a big gap between them in a final dash for the line, certainly not after 6 hours of racing.
Interesting to see how Ulrich handles the sprint. As we said earlier, we have seen him being a very good sprinter, but he will have to lead this sprint out, I would think, and that's where he may well cause the error, because normally he spends much of his season riding for the overall standings. To actually win individual stages is not so important to him anymore, and he may well have lost the knack of taking out an individual sprint. His only chance, I think, was the big chance he took earlier on the climb, trying to go clear alone, and that didn't work because Francesco Casagrande and Laurent Dufaux nailed him back.
Running off the tops now. The sea is on the horizon again, at least that's what they call it. It's a huge lake here in Zurich. Lots of pleasure boats and ferry boats on it. They come off that mountain at just a shade short of 55 miles an hour. And Ulrich has been the man keeping control of the descent as he wants to.
Casagrande backing off just a little bit. He should be riding just a little closer there to the wheel of Laurent Dufaux. Oh, that was a bit dodgy. There was a traffic island. This is the problem now, Phil, with the international cycling. So many of these towns have special furniture out on the roads to direct traffic left and right, and it's becoming very dangerous for bike riders coming down at speeds, as you said, in excess of 55 miles an hour.
Yes, and forced onto the wrong side of the road for that sort of speed for the right-hand bend, but they're all safely round. And Laurent Dufaux gets on with it. Casagrande just making sure that Rebellin and Armstrong aren't coming back, particularly Rebellin, because those two are rivals for selection for the Olympic Games.
It's going to be very difficult. A lot of controversy at the moment about the inclusion of Marco Pantani into the selection for the Olympic Games, and I'm a little surprised at that, because although Pantani is a great climber, I've never really seen him as a one-day bike rider, and to put him in makes me feel that the Italians are actually losing the possibility of putting in a good bike rider for one-day races.
I couldn't agree more. It's certainly not a course of Pantani. Sydney, Australia, a course which I know very well after some 12 years of visiting Sydney, and I had the pleasure of driving around the course a year ago to check it out, along with Ray Godkin, the president of the Australian Cycling Federation. 52 seconds, still drifting out from 37, so they're out of it now. It's the fourth place sprint here for one of them.
Well, Armstrong, I think, probably kicking himself, but it was a very decisive moment there. Armstrong was with the group when the acceleration came. He just didn't quite have what it took to stay on the wheel of these three riders, and I think probably, Phil, because the rumour is that Armstrong's training over the last month or so has really been tilted to